Ladies and gentlemen, our next event of the evening is a one-fall match with a 60-minute time limit.
What I'd like to have right now,
where the big boys play.
This is where the big boys play, huh?
This is where the big boys play.
You're listening to Where the Big Boys Play for the fourth time, and as ever, I'm here with Chad. How are you doing, Chad?
Doing great. Late Saturday night and early Sunday morning. So.
Yeah, due to some scheduling difficulties here, it's actually 6 a.m. here in the UK, and I can't quite believe that I'm up at this hour to talk about Starrcade 84. And you've been to Hooters, Chad, right? To watch UFC.
Yeah, I went to Hooters, got some wings, watched some fights that were pretty subpar, and then came home before the main event. So I just looked it up. It doesn't look like I missed too much, so whatever.
So was Dangerous Dan 7 on the card this evening?
No Dangerous Dan or Tank Abbott, unfortunately.
We're going to pick up where we left off to look at Starrcade 84 tonight. Quite a bit of a fast forward from where we were last time. A whole year since Starrcade 83, and we did a show on Final Conflict as well. So this is even Final Conflict was before Starrcade 83. So we're jumping ahead quite a bit here. But this is actually the next big show, really. Starrcade 84 is the million dollar challenge, and everything about it smacks of being a sequel. We've got the same hosts, Bob Caudle and Gordon Soley, the same music, and the same sort of production values. Any thoughts before we go into this, Chad?
Well, they added lasers. That was the one big addition. I don't know who at Crockett Productions got a crash course on lasers, but there was quite a few moments in this show where they were pretty prominent, including right at the very beginning.
Yeah, they went in for these kind of sound and light shows where they play the music and everything will go dark in the arena, and then this kind of we treated to this very 80s laser show. So yeah.
Well, I guess too, one thing that I sort of noticed and I was kind of taken aback by was, this was right around the time where the WWF was sort of entering the rock and wrestling era. And with this show that I may have seen parts of before, but I don't think I've seen the whole show before, I guess I just either didn't notice it or didn't see the parts of it. But, I sort of think of the NWA as kind of like an old school promotion in comparison to the WWF. But here you had lasers, a lot of modern music. So, they were almost as much rock and wrestling as, as for instance, WrestleMania 1, which was 4 months after this.
Do you know what was interesting to me? That Crockett actually would shell out for actual music by artists,
Yeah.
He'd actually pay for the songs, and Vince was always too tight to pay for songs. He'd get them written in-house. So that was interesting, because we got a lot, as we go through this guide, you'll see a lot of well-known hits, as it were, from the day.
Maybe he paid for the songs. I don't know. We could have had a Paul Heyman ECW situation going on.
Yeah, maybe in 1984 they didn't know about things like that.
Yeah, it's possible. But anyway.
So the big storyline here is that not only are Flair and Dusty fighting over the NWA World Title, but they're also there's a $1 million prize at stake here as well. Do you know any of the backstory of this, about how this $1 million came about?
No, I don't. Do you, Parv?
No.
Okay. I would assume that it's not like this was a first-time matchup between Dusty and Flair, especially around this territory and around this area geographically. I'm sure they have wrestled numerous times at this point. I mean, Flair obviously won the championship for the first time from Dusty in Kansas City. So maybe this was just like an added something to sort of add some oomph to that match that was a little familiar. So they put in the $1 Million Challenge along with Smokin' Joe.
So do you think that the winner of this is actually going to get $1 million, or do you think this was a work?
Have you ever heard the story about Kamala and his wife in regards to that?
No.
Apparently he was in some battle royal, and it may have been Memphis or some territory like that, but the battle royal had a prize of it was pretty small, maybe $15,000, which, I mean, you know, back in that time was a decent amount of change, but not $1 million. Anyway, Kamala won, and then when he got home, his wife was like demanding to know where the money was. She didn't realize that it was just something to sell the show on, and he didn't actually win $15,000 for winning the battle royal.
You know, this is a little bit off topic here, but I listened to a shoot with Kamala, and he was going on about that he never really got a big payday, like never got a big payoff. I don't know how much of that is true, but like he was saying the most he ever got paid for a show was like $1,000 or something. It was ridiculous. It was even the Hogan big paydays weren't big for him for some reason. Maybe nobody was willing to pay Kamala big money. I don't know. But
who knows?
Who knows how much to believe in any shoot interview?
Yeah. Some seem pretty genuine, but I mean, we are talking about wrestling, so I would take pretty much everything with a grain of salt.
So the first match on this show, Denny Brown versus Mike Davis, and God, when this started, I was pumped. We've got a real big name value here. So Mike Davis is the cruiserweight champion, and he was actually working on World Class at this point in Texas. And I believe that Denny Brown was also in Texas at this time, so this is basically a World Class match put on the Starrcade card. And our referee is Earl Hebner.
I knew that before that he started in the NWA, but I'd forgotten it. So when Dr. Tom announced that, I sort of did a double take, and I was like, "Oh, really?"
Yeah, and he gets worse in heel heat there as well. He gets booed.
The crowd was really high.
Yeah.
I don't for these two, white meat, pretty basic wrestlers. I was really surprised throughout the whole night. The crowd was one of the best parts of this show, actually.
From what I could understand, Brown and Davis were both babyfaces here. So this is a babyface versus babyface match for the cruiserweight title. I actually thought it was a pretty decent opener, as good as you can hope for from these two.
Yeah, I mean, everything I've seen of Mike Davis, as far as tape, has been pretty similar to this, where it's usually either the opening match or one of the opening few matches. And most of the matches are under 10 minutes, kind of energetic, pretty basic, but everything's executed well. So I thought this, followed that script pretty well, where, I mean, there wasn't a ton of expert holds or high advanced moves being performed, but everything was done well. Kind of a sportsmanship type match.
The finish was confusing here.
The finish was the worst part of the match by far.
And our friend Gordon Soley seems to call it wrong.
And Davis, the champion's got a lot of problems right here. Reversal by Davis, however. Belly to back suplex, beautifully executed high bridge.
And he pinned him out of that. That was a beautiful wrestling move right there by Mike Davis, Gordon.
No question about it. The mark of a champion.
champion. Denny Brown has got the belt there,
Well,
Gordon.
some confusion there. The announcer thought that it was Denny Brown who was had pinned Mike Davis. It was not. It was Mike Davis pinning Denny Brown.
Essentially, I guess Davis, or no, is it? Okay, now I'm getting confused. Davis gives Brown the belly-to-back suplex, and he has him in the pinning position, but it's the same. I mean, it's a finish that's sort of been repeated where one person gives the other a suplex, and then he's down for the pinfall, but the person that actually had the move performed on him raises his shoulder right before the three. So the person that actually performed the move, which in this case was Davis, is the one counted out.
Yeah.
So Brown won the title, which we eventually realized, but first Davis was announced as the winner by Tom Miller. Then Gordon says we have a new champion, but acts like Davis won, which he was the champion going in. So it was totally chaos, and you as the viewer had really no idea what happened until about 2 minutes later they finally said, no, Brown won, and showed the replay.
This is what I was saying before. It seems like they worked it so that none of the announcers or the ring announcer or anybody knew what the finish was going to be.
Yeah, I don't think either Gordon or Caudle had any idea of what this finish, and as we'll see in a couple of more matches, there was some confusion, so I don't think they were really in on any of the finishes except maybe the main event because of the way they conveyed that story, which I thought seemed sort of an odd choice, and especially in this match really hindered some stuff because, again, it was really, really confusing.
Yeah, and actually, Sody did get it right. He called Brown, but then acted like Davis won, but actually Brown did win, and it was a new, very confusing start to the show.
Yes.
Did anybody care about the Cruiserweight title in 1984? I wonder.
Yeah, I think I know Mike Davis most of the time was just sort of somebody to go out there, get the crowd kind of clapping their hands, sort of as a, kind of to warm the crowd up, and then he'd go out and do his thing and then leave, so, I don't know.
So, just as last year, we've got Tony Schiavone in the locker room, and he
actually looked younger.
Yeah,
which I didn't think was possible.
he looked even younger this year, and
he looked like he went from about age 18 to about 17.
Did he still have the mustache? I can't remember now.
No, I think that was it. I think the mustache was off, so that probably is what attributed to him looking so much younger.
Yeah, and our second matchup now we have, we've got Mr. Ito, and I've written in my notes who. And then I've got versus Brian Adidas, and I've also written who. Although apparently this Brian Adidas was pretty popular, he was very over with this particular crowd. And
and I've seen Adidas in some world class stuff, and I don't know. He kind of always sort of reminded me of, in some ways, a primetime Brian Lee. And Smoky Mountain, sort of that mold, where he really got a real good push, but he wasn't very good at all. He could be carried to something serviceable. I know in the world class set that Death Valley Driver did. He's in a few matches. I've seen most of those, and they're good matches, but he really has to have somebody to sort of hold his hand for him to do anything extraordinary, and this certainly was not the case in this match.
So, yeah, I mean, my World Class is really a promotion I've seen very little of. For some reason, it doesn't interest me like a lot of the other ones do. There's something about World Class that just kind of like isn't my scene. Do you know what I mean?
The Freebird, I've seen a pretty fair amount of world class. The Freebird Von Erich feud is really, really good, and we can kind of get into this if we decide to do sort of a state of the territory show. But the Freebird Von Erich feud, obviously sort of is the cornerstone of the promotion for a long time, and all those matches are at least good. But one thing you found with that is there was a lot of repetition. So there was, a year where you see essentially the same 6 guys just in, different spots and pairings wrestle each other. And while it's good, it does get a sort of repetitive feel. And then I'm not as high as on the dynamic duo stuff as I know a lot of people are.
Yeah, well, and it's kind of like, I guess the Von Erichs hold no real kind of interest for me. Like, I'm not kind of, I've seen a few of those big stadium shows, and it's just like, I don't know. I guess it just seems like one of those things where you had to be there to really get it, if that makes any sense. Like, I can't really relate to the Von Erichs as a bunch of baby faces that I'd pop for in any way. Like, as a guy sitting in 2012 in the UK, like, I don't know how I'm meant to be interested in that, if that makes any sense. But
yeah, I think definitely sort of the southern United States tradition of kind of a standing tall cowboy type character really sort of resonates more than obviously it would for you, someone in the UK.
Yeah, but I guess I should watch some more Freebirds, and I guess a lot of Michael Hayes' best stuff is in Texas, right? So
yeah. I mean, Hayes is in some incredible matches. His cage match with Kerry in 1983. It's 8 minutes, maybe. It's really quick. It's a really quick match. Maybe my favorite under 10-minute match of all time. I mean, just great hatred. Really good action. It's a great match.
Yeah, I will get into it at some point, but as of right now, on the list of stuff to do, it's kind of like
down there.
Yeah, it's down there. Yeah,
yeah.
Just above like Portland and all those,
Oh, don't sell Portland short. You'll like Portland when you get around to watching that too.
Well, it's above Puerto Rico. And
okay, there you go. There we go. I got no beef with that.
All right, I have to watch it. I'm pretty pumped actually. I have my week off now, and the AWA set has finally arrived. So I'll be watching that as the week progresses.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, just a quick aside on the AWA set, I'm not sure how, it's kind of one of them things where I'm not sure how much the promotion will necessarily fit my taste in wrestling, because I always sort of have a vision of AWA kind of being a dull, black and white promotion, where things were pretty basic storyline wise, but it is something that I've seen very, very little of, as far as only seeing a couple of the Rockers versus Rose and Summers matches and the Bockwinkel Henning Iron Man match, which I thought was, or not Iron Man match, but the hour draw match, which was really great. So that's the main thing I'm interested in that set is of the 150 matches that were selected, I would guess at most I've seen 8 of them. So the 142 matches are new to me.
Yeah, the thing that I'm looking forward to there is just the variety of characters, guys at weird points in their career, like guys just starting out, guys who are in their late 50s, like just a weird mix of people at different stages.
Right.
That's what I'm looking forward to there. But maybe further down the line we can do something on AWA.
Absolutely. Okay.
So Soli, this Mr. Ito, by the way. I was trying to find some more information on him, and it's actually not. There's a guy called Umanazuki Ueda, a Japanese wrestler, who did a lot of stuff in All Japan, and he worked Mid-South and New Japan, and he's done quite a lot of stuff. He's a big time like NWA wrestler in the 70s. This man is not this particular Mr. Ito, because he went by Mr. Ito. Yeah, so it's not him. It's in fact a guy called Masao Ito, who was pretty much a jobber, from what I could tell. Like, he mainly did he worked Mid-South. He did some stuff for Crockett, but mainly he was a enhancement guy. So not a lot to say about Mr. Ito here. And this is essentially what this match is. Kind of a squash to put Brian Adidas over.
Oh yeah, I mean, in the Final Conflict show, we talked about how some of the matches would not look that out of place on a Superstars taping or something like that. This match, even more so than anything we've seen so far in the shows we reviewed. This was 4 minutes. Ito got in the most basic of offense in, and then Adidas gave an airplane spin and pinned him, I mean, really, really fast, and that was it. We didn't get a chance to see much from Adidas. We got a chance to see nothing from Mr. Ito, so this was essentially a squash in every sense of the word.
And this had all the makings of a push here, because Sully and Coddle really talk up Adidas as being a rising star during this match, but it doesn't look like he did much with Crockett.
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't do much with Crockett. That was sort of weird, as they really talked him up as an up and rising prospect, similar to how Rotundo was talked up in the Final Conflict show, but not much happened to follow up this unless there's something that I'm unaware of.
He kind of reminded me a little bit of Rick Martel or Tito Santana during their Strike Force days here. Like, that's that kind of type of babyface, you know? Like, he seemed like he might go on to be somebody like that, but obviously that didn't happen. And so he calls this a catch-as-catch-can match.
Mr. Ito with the tremendous combination of the Oriental style of wrestling plus his adaptation to the American catch-as-catch-can style. Going up against Brian Adidas, who certainly, I think, represents U.S. catch-as-catch-can wrestling at its very finest.
Can you explain to me what that means? What is that?
Well, it wasn't what we got here, what I take it to mean. I mean, to me, catch-as-catch-can, to be honest, I think of the first thing that pops into my mind is really some British wrestling, kind of Regal, Finley.
Yeah, well, I think of Billy Robinson when somebody...
Yeah, Billy Robinson, that's a perfect example. Just sort of trading holds, cranking out submissions with neat counters, not basic moves and then an airplane spin. So I don't know if Sully was just throwing something out there just to say something. I would assume so, because this was certainly not catch-as-catch-can.
Yeah, that occurred to me as well.
Yeah, that's a head-scratcher.
So then, if I'm not mistaken, we go straight from this into Mike Graham versus Jesse Barr.
Yes.
And these are two guys from Florida fighting over the Florida state title. Now Jesse Barr may be better known to some fans as Jimmy Jack Funk in the WWF, and Mike Graham is the slightly annoying guy from the Legends of Wrestling Roundtables. And in fact, I've seen a number of shoots with Mike Graham, and he is one guy who you can't really trust a lot of the stuff that he says. But to be fair to him, he looked really good in this match to me, quite smooth. And this was clearly, I mean, they were fighting over a regional title here, the Florida title, and it was another example of them putting two wrestlers from a different promotion on this supercard. I'm kind of thinking about how the booking works here. I mean, did Florida definitely get this show? Did they have? Because it would have still been closed circuit at that point, right?
Yes, I would assume there was definitely some closed circuit locations in Florida at some of the hot spots, big towns down there.
But presumably the local crowd wouldn't have known these two guys if they were mainly Florida guys. Like, they wouldn't really have a reason to care about this.
Right. I mean, this definitely... I'm sure I would be almost positive that Mike Graham, for instance, had done a tour of the Carolinas at some point before this.
Right.
And I would assume Jesse Barr also. But yeah, it definitely is not a match they're seeing, every month. But I mean, the crowd was hot, so maybe they were aware of more. I mean, maybe the Florida TV was somehow syndicated up there. Who knows?
But this was a pretty, they worked this as a kind of technical style match. It's a lot of mat work. I guess this is closer to your catch can.
Yes. This would have been a better place to throw out that phrase than in the last match.
I don't know if it's because these two guys are Florida guys, but Soli definitely seemed more switched on here. This seemed to be he seemed more in his element calling this match.
Seems to really take to Barr. He really put over Barr very big. As much as Adidas, was being talked up, I thought Jesse Barr was being talked up equally.
Yeah, and I actually thought he looked pretty good here. I thought both of these guys looked good.
Yeah, the Graham working on the leg was real. I mean, it was basic, but it was very interesting, and he was really cranking the leg, and Barr got a hammerlock on him, and that again, as far as hammerlocks goes, was really tightly applied, and they basically sort of really stayed focused on that, which was nice to see, where they kept going back to that and revisiting it, and we ended up with a figure four, and then Barr eventually got the pin with his feet on the ropes, which was a decent finish at this point in the card in order for Barr to go over, but Graham to still look pretty strong.
It should explain here that Graham is the face here. Barr is the heel, Graham the face. And I actually thought that we seen an Indian deathlock from Graham at one point. I mean, he really looks like somebody. He surprised me in this match. He really looks like he knows what he's doing. He controlled this match. You could tell that it was Graham who was working this. He was the one calling the moves in this.
Yeah, well, I wonder if more footage of Florida existed, if Graham would sort of become kind of like a Greg Gagne figure, where he's the son of a promotion. He's a pretty undersized person compared to a lot of other wrestlers at this time. Doesn't have the best look in the world. Gagne's worse than Graham, but Graham certainly doesn't have a great look. But really could work pretty well, and was, even though their push might have, been better than their actual ability at times, they could go more than they've been given credit for over the years.
He's definitely not Eric Watts, I'll tell you that.
No, absolutely not. Of the footage I've seen, which is, again, pretty limited, but all the matches I've seen with Graham in has been solid, and he at least looks competent in the ring.
Soli mentions that he was a state powerlifting champion. and also, which has really surprised me. And also, because he doesn't look like a powerlifting champion.
Yeah, that's one where I might have to check the record book on that again.
And he also called this match human chess, which I thought was a great little Soliism there. But yeah, this was probably one of the better matches that we've seen so far for me.
Best match up to this point, I would say. I thought it was better in the opener. Given a little more time, worked a little better. Like I said, the work on the leg and the arm was well done. So I mean, it was not great or anything, but it was a decent match that had its place on this card.
I think it dragged a little bit in the middle, but then that's again like any match that seems to have guys lying about on the mat. Unless it's literally worked like Robinson versus Bockwinkel, I start to get a little bit bored.
Mm-hmm.
And for how long was this match? A 10-minute match, something like that.
I would say even about 8 to 10 minutes.
They probably spent too long doing the working holds. I actually like to see for a 10-minute match, ideally the first 2-3 minutes would be holds. Then they'd literally start doing some other stuff, I guess, progressing through strikes and getting onto some high spots. But yeah, that's not what we saw here. But still, it was good for what it was. So then we have quite an unusual matchup here. The Assassin, still around, Jody Hamilton, now in his early 70s. Well,
as a face.
So we, bizarrely, the Assassin as a face with the Avalanche, Buzz Tyler, another dancing babyface. Seemingly endless amount of dancing baby faces here.
They come out to Footloose, which I mean, if you look at the Assassin and all the possible theme songs, probably towards the bottom of that endless list would be Footloose, but that is what was selected for him. I mean, Buzz, bless his heart, he's not exactly somebody you'd envision coming out to that song either, but especially the Assassin. I mean, Footloose, come on.
This is a really odd pairing here because Buzz Tyler's dancing about, doing his best kind of, Dusty Rhodes moves, and the Assassin is just standing there.
Yeah, he had this same, real sort of, Jody has a real kind of sour-looking face, just as a natural expression. But it was extremely humorous in this setting, because, Buzz was beaming around, all around, dancing, as this Footloose was blaring, and the Assassin was just sort of standing there, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else in the world.
At some point, you and I need to do, like a top 5 fat dancing baby faces of this era, because
I never heard of Buzz Tyler, but he's got to be up there because he was really giving it.
He was over, I tell you that much.
Yeah, and I'd never heard of this guy, and I think it was just a really hot crowd, though. I mean, this crowd.
See, here's what I'm wondering: was Buzz Tyler over, or did crowds at this time literally just lose their shit whenever anybody would dance? I don't know.
In the song too. Footloose, I would assume, was probably on the charts at this point in time.
So their opponents here, and this had me going immediately to the Google, the Zambuie Express.
Yes.
2 massive black guys, super heavyweights basically, with Mr. T haircuts. And these guys were big, close to 400 pounds, if not more.
Right, yeah.
And they're with Paul Jones. Is that right?
Right, they were with Paul.
And they announced something so now I was confused. This is a tag elimination match. It kind of worked with Survivor Series rules, even though it's 2-on-2.
Right.
So they mentioned this, but then I didn't really understand what was going on because seemingly there was no elimination. It didn't work like that.
Yeah, this was our second confusing type of finish. Just for reference, the Zambuie Express is Ray Candy, who grew up in Georgia and did a lot in Georgia and Florida, Carolinas, died early. And then Big Bad Leroy Brown, which my personal most experience with him is in Mid-South and kind of the waning days of Mid-South in Skandar Akbars. He was in their stable. He was pretty brutal in that period of time. But yeah, this was worked elimination style. Very, very quick match again. This may have went 5 minutes from bell to bell. And the ending, I thought the Zambuie Express in the match had some good punches. Ray Candy, which I can't remember if I think he's Akeem instead of Muhammad. I don't really understand the Zambuie Express gimmick. Did you have any idea sort of what their what they were trying to accomplish, where they were from.
Yeah, it was bizarre. It was almost like they were having the. It was almost like their gimmick was they were part of that kind of what do they call it? The one nation Africans, is it? Where like Marcus Garvey and all that sort of stuff, where they're kind of like it's like a Muslim brotherhood, because like these are clearly Muslim names, like.
Right. Yeah.
So maybe that was the thinking, but it wasn't really brought across because they've got these Mr. T haircuts. It's not like they're working wild. So this isn't. It's not like they're working Kamala style gimmicks here. They're not like wild men. They seem more like kind of, I guess, more like one man gang, but without any punk. It was very difficult to see what the gimmick was here. They were just too.
Yeah, it was almost like they dressed up in these costumes for Halloween or something, and just became this Zambuie Express. I mean, they had a pretty long-standing partnership. So I may sound ignorant, but as far as just seeing this match, and I haven't seen them tag much at all, it was very difficult to kind of get a sense of what they were about, why they were the Zambuie Express, and
or why Paul Jones was with them.
Right, yeah, I didn't get that connection either.
I was going to mention here, Gordon Soley just gives up any pretense of being able to tell between the two of them, and he just calls both men the Zambuie Express, which I find pretty amusing.
And it got me confused too, because as we said in the Starrcade 83 show, the light was pretty dark as far as the in-ring action, so at certain points it was kind of tough to tell what exactly was going on, especially when they would switch places and all four guys were in the ring.
So this was a pretty crappy match.
This was bad.
If this
very short.
I didn't understand what happened here. Kareem was pinned.
I guess. Well, the action broke down. All four were brawling, and then Assassin and I guess was that Akeem? Is that one of? Anyway, one of the Zambuie Express went to the outside and got counted out, essentially. But both of them were eliminated, but we never got a bell. We never got an announcement, and the announcers were pretty much clueless. So while that is going on, I'm sorry, that was Tyler that was actually on the outside. Assassin and Muhammad are in the ring, and they both run into each other. Muhammad falls to the mat, and Assassin's sort of out on the ropes, and Tyler, who just got counted out, along with the other member of the Zambuie Express, pushes the Assassin on top of Muhammad, and they get the pinfall and the win. But this was almost as confusing as the first match, where, the announcers sort of called it like that was the first pinfall, and the match was going to continue, and then next thing you see, everybody's hightailing it back to the dressing room, and we just go on to the next thing.
If they weren't going to make a big deal of it being an elimination, like, if there wasn't going to be a period where it was 2-on-1, I don't understand the point of making this elimination style. Like,
it's
terrible
such a
booking.
Pointless stipulation.
Terrible booking. Need Pat Patterson to do finishes here. Or somebody who can book finishes.
It's just too much confusion. I mean, I can't imagine if I was a big wrestling fan getting somebody to come watch this show and having to sit there and explain, a ton of what has been going on, because this was twice now in 4 matches where even the announcers did not have a clear, story on what happened at the finish of the match.
And, it's also, like, confusion is just not something you want to go for at the end of any match. It's just, like, the weakest possible finish, I think. It's confusion. Okay, so we're back to the locker room. Tony Schiavone is there with Dusty Rhodes. And I just got a note here that Dusty Rhodes is in some sort of tracksuit or something, and he looks absolutely massive.
Huge. That's exactly what I said. He looked huge in this thing. He had, I don't know what he was wearing. He had like a jacket or something. It looked like sort of over him.
Yeah.
That had Dusty on the side of it, but just the way he was sitting, he was sort of slouching, like laying back in the chair, and it looked awful.
I mean, when we say huge, this is like Yokozuna just before he died big.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, he looked at least as big as Earthquake in his day here. He looked bad. I mean, he gave a decent promo, I thought, but somebody should, I don't know, somebody should have told him to stand up. I'm not one of these people that, I like Dusty, and I'm obviously not like Vince, that's, everybody has to be ripped to shreds and a great physique, but if you're challenging for the world title, I think you should at least look in decent shape or physical threat in some regards. And I mean, to be honest, this looked like me sitting in a chair, sort of backstage or something. It did not look good.
I think that this may be Dusty in this promo may be the worst anybody has ever looked on a wrestling show. It's just ridiculous.
Yeah, he looked really bad. I mean, he looked just huge.
Anyway, Michael Jackson's Beat It plays, and I was really surprised. And then we get the Raging Bull, Manny Fernandez.
Yeah.
So I guess Beat It was his music at this point. It's kind of not clear, is it? Or are they just playing the music to pop the crowd? I don't know.
Yeah, and they don't really fit. That's what, I mean, the music doesn't necessarily fit the personas, so I'm not sure.
So we also get, so Manny Fernandez is up against Black Bart, also known as Rick Harris from the Final Conflict show. Now he's got a proper gimmick and he's got a manager too, JJ Dillon. And this is for something called the Brass Knuckles Championship, and it's an anything goes match. So I was confused here because this seemed to be like some sort of hardcore title. The Brass Knuckles weren't really part of this match. Like, why weren't they both wearing brass knuckles? It was very confused. Like, I was very confused as to what this title is all about.
Yeah, most of the brass knuckle title matches I've seen, I don't know if that was just a term that meant they were, essentially, like you said, a hardcore title where they could really brawl and punch, and maybe instead of the literal meaning of having a pair of brass knuckles. But again, we really see this is very early in the show, and we've already had a Florida heavyweight championship match, a light heavyweight championship match, now this brass knuckles match. So they sort of tried to beef up this show with a lot of titles, but
yeah, and this particular
the action doesn't really speak for
this particular.
You're not getting championship quality matches.
This particular title is a Florida title. We should mention it's like from the Florida territory. This brass knuckles championship, and putting out, it's actually had a really, really long history going back to like 1960.
Yeah, so I don't know if that predates the actual usage of brass knuckles. I don't know.
Some pretty interesting people held this title. Mike DiBiase held it. Boris Malenko, Jose Lothario.
Okay.
Missouri Mora. Thunderbolt Patterson had it at one point. So, wow, what a title. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it was ever considered prestigious or anything. Probably not, but it'd been around. Manny Fernandez seems to be bleeding almost immediately, as we've come to expect from him.
Yeah.
I don't even know what leads to him bleeding here. He may even come to the match bleeding. I don't know.
He gets really bloody, really quick. And our overhead camera angle returned from the previous year, so that was nice. I know Black Bart at one point in this match gives an elbow drop from that overhead camera, and that looked really good because I thought the punching. I mean, this is essentially a punch and kick match.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I mean that's essentially all the holds you saw here. So it's kind of tough to describe the action because, I mean, it's 8 to 10 minutes of punching and kicking. And I didn't think the shots looked particularly well in most instances.
There's one really good diving fist drop from Manny Fernandez.
Yes.
That's the only real note I've got. And it looked quite good because not many people do. I know Ted DiBiase does a kind of his own like signature fist drop, but that's like a kind of standard fist drop and a really good one that we see from Manny Fernandez. But yeah, that's the only real high spot in this entire match. I just got written there. It's just too short for what it is. Needed more time to get going. Again, kind of another nothing match.
Yeah, I mean, just a basic little brawl. Didn't seem very intensity much going on here. Bart, I mean, he would have one good punch, but then he would throw about 4 or 5 just terrible ones, which was really weird, I thought. I mean, he would mix in one good punch where he'd really connect with Fernandez, but then the next couple would just look really bad. And the ending is Bart goes for the bull rope, but Fernandez is able to get to him while he's going for the bull rope and roll him up to get the pinfall. So not much going on here at all. Just a punch and kick, basic brawl. Not very good.
Yeah, and on the old records here, I'm not sure if this was like recognized this title. I think it was maybe discontinued very shortly after this match because I don't think Manny Fernandez went on some kind of run as the brass knuckles champion here after the match because I think he was like a tag champ.
Mm-hmm.
If not at this time, shortly after this, went on quite a long run as a tag champion, or was it even quite a bit later? I know Rick.
Well, he had that run with Rude, which was 86. I know his matches with the Rock and Roll Express were, I want to say 86, maybe early 87. They were very good.
Yeah, I guess Manny Fernandez was like an early hardcore pioneer. In some ways.
Yeah, in some ways. Yeah, this was pretty bad.
So we go to Soli and Coddle, and I've just got a note here saying that they look so fed up. They couldn't look more disinterested in this show. They just look like they want to go home or something.
And then you get the announcement of a 7-minute intermission.
Yeah, 7-minute intermission going into this. And that means we get a promo from Ricky Steamboat, who gives the most white meat, most wholesome, most babyface promo imaginable. And he calls Tully Blanchard a yellow-bellied coward. And I was really surprised to see this match on the card. I never knew that Tully and Steamboat had a match. And it's kind of forgotten, I think, that this whole thing happened. Nobody ever really talks about this match or this angle. So I think the story is that they've both put up $10,000 of their own money. So Tully's the TV champion, and they both put up $10,000, and the title can change hands on a DQ. And the Steamboat versus Tully. So yeah, not a lot to say about the Steamboat promo. It's just again, it was just very typical of a babyface promo at this time. Not very shouty, quite quiet, that kind of. Any thoughts about the Steamboat promo here?
I thought it was a pretty good promo as far as him talking about overcoming the odds, and he may be injured, but he doesn't want Tully to know how injured he is and where exactly he's injured. We did get a little production snafu at the beginning where they threw it to Tony and the light went out. And Tony just froze up. It was a deer in the headlights look he gives, and they quickly go back to Soli, and then they throw it back out, and it's working now. But I thought overall this interview was really good, and I thought it was interesting throughout this intermission. that they essentially only talked about the Steamboat and Tully match, where in the Starrcade 83 card, we had endless promos only on the Flair race match. And that was clearly presented as the main event. Here, Steamboat and Tully got as much hype during the show as Flair and Dusty.
Yeah, it definitely had a spotlight on it, this match. And I got the impression that maybe this match was a draw in its own right. Some of the buys were coming from this match as much as the other one. I thought it was a little bit weird that they put another match with a money kind of stipulation.
Yeah, it's especially, I mean, you have one match with $10,000, which it was of their own money, but then to go immediately from that to a $1 million prize did seem bizarre.
So, we go back to Cardle and Soli, and they analyze Tully as a psychological competitor. And I guess this buys Tony some time to run to the heel locker room where he's with Tully Blanchard and JJ Dillon. So I'm not sure where Baby Doll is at this time. Because, I mean, Baby Doll was around, right? At this point?
I don't know if she was quite around yet. And Tully should have been really, really fresh, because this would have been coming off his world-class run. So I don't know if they'd put it together yet, them two.
So yeah, he's with JJ Dillon here, and I didn't actually know that he had a run with Dillon before the Horseman.
Right. This really sort of seemed like, in a lot of ways, kind of a Horseman origin story with Dillon here. And Dillon cut a good pretentious promo, and Tully gave another good promo talking about how he didn't feel sorry for Steamboat.
And I thought it was really great here how Dillon was still sore about the Black Bart loss. This is not a good night for me.
Yeah.
And you know, I've never really understood why JJ Dillon gets talked about as a, you know, even being in the conversation of great managers. I always just thought, well, because he was the Horseman's manager, he just gets thrown into that conversation. But he really impressed me on the show. Maybe more on that later, but he was really I enjoyed him in this promo.
Agreed. I had the same thought. I mean, as far as managers that we've seen in the NWA so far, what he did on this show, I would put ahead of Paul Jones, any managing he's done, and Gary Hart. So he's been the best manager we've seen as far as in the NWA on the 3 shows we've watched, in my opinion.
Definitely. And Tully during this, he accuses Steamer of being a crybaby, making excuses about being injured. And then, interestingly, he wants a shot at the world title, and even makes overtures about facing Ric Flair one day, which was interesting. And they were even during the Horseman days, there was always that slight tension between Flair and Tully, as like who's the number one top dog type thing in that group. Tully's like the kind of, I guess if Flair is the alpha male, Tully is the beta male, kind of like, you know, he really wants to be where Flair is.
Right. I think Tully's very good at portraying that, you know, he thinks he's always the best person in a room. You know, he's the greatest person when he gets in a room.
And I am a superior wrestler because of the fact that Ricky Steamboat, you've got to make excuses. You've had to make excuses over the last 3 or 4 months, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, 50 minutes, all time limits. I carried you. I took you. And now you've got a hurt rib, a hurt back, and you want to cry. You backed me into the corner. You got the, if I get disqualified, I lose the title. If I run and stall, you get the title. Ricky Steamboat, you had to put up $10,000, a contract to sign. Hurt back, broke leg, anything. And it's a sad, sad thing that a man that has reached the epitome, the apex of his career, has to make excuses before the biggest night of professional wrestling, before he gets in the ring, of why he can't win. Well, Ricky Steamboat, your fans out there, they might cheer for you anyway, broken ribs or not. You're going down, and then after that, the world's champion, whether it be Flair or Dusty Rhodes, Tully Blanchard is on a path of destiny.
Sully thinks Tully is overconfident. Cardle says that the adrenaline will push Steamboat in this match, and adrenaline means that he won't be feeling any pain. And then they discuss an upcoming match, Billy Graham versus Wahoo McDaniel for the US title. And at that point, I was quite intrigued to see that match. More on that later. And then we get the awesome Starrcade theme, which brings us back. They just play it for no apparent reason. I can see more light shows. And then I've got a big scribbled out note. I said, this is the second half of the Zambuie Express versus Assassin and Buzz Tyler. Weird that they'd taken intermission during that match. But I was completely wrong. So I obviously hadn't understood that the Zambuie Express match was over already. Because I thought that they were out again. Because the Assassin is out again. Paul Jones is back. And half of the Zambuie Express is out. But this time Jimmy Valiant is here. And this is in fact a loser leaves town tuxedo street fight. Tuxedo match. So it's Paul Jones versus Jimmy Valiant. But Paul Jones has brought one half of the Zambuie Express as his second. And Jimmy Valiant has brought the Assassin as his second. They used to do these tuxedo matches fairly regularly, right?
I will admit that I had a soft spot for this whole match. First off, Boogie Woogie Man, he gets an amazing reaction. I mean, the crowd is going crazy. And of all the dancing wrestlers, Dusty may, I don't know. I think Boogie Woogie Man may edge him out because he's just such a interesting character. He kisses Tom Miller, which I thought was awesome, and just the whole spectacle. I mean, Boogie Woogie really made this match to me. I mean, this was all Boogie Woogie, and in a lot of the tuxedo matches you see, I think most of the time it's sort of driven by the heel, whether it's a manager or what have you. The heel's the person that's begging off, creating the heat, and sort of driving the action. Here, it was all, to me, Boogie Woogie Man. What he was doing, his antics, tying Jones to the ropes and stripping off his clothes. Paul Jones eventually gets loose and works over Jimmy for about a minute. And then Boogie grabs a sleeper, and that is when I know I said the Slaughter blade job in the Final Conflict match may have been the most obvious blade job I've seen in quite some time, but Jones eclipsed it here because Boogie grabs a sleeper, and Jones immediately goes right to his forehead and slashes the razor across, and then of course the announcers are confused and they make up this story that they hadn't noticed it until that time, even though it happened. But then at the end, JJ Dillon comes in and hits Jimmy with I don't know what. I never looked like a can of hairspray or something, and that gave Jones the win. So Boogie Woogie Man unfortunately has to leave town.
He has to go back to being Charlie Brown.
Yeah, that may make way for Charlie Brown to make a reappearance very soon. If I'm a betting man, I would expect to see Charlie Brown on the cards immediately following this show. But I mean, this was obviously a very shtick-oriented match.
I've got written here horseshit, but good horseshit.
Yes, I mean it was definitely. I think it was a perfect sort of slotted match too, where this wasn't the blow off yet. It was right after intermission, so immediately after intermission, you have Jimmy getting the crowd just crazy, and I mean, just watching the past. I mean, just his name being announced at Final Conflict, got a huge pop, and then at both Starrcades, he has been one of the top 2 or 3 most popular wrestlers, up there with Dusty, Flair, Piper, anybody else.
Yeah, I mean,
which is kind of amazing.
If WWF is your point of reference, because there will be people who are very familiar with the kind of rock and wrestling era, but maybe less familiar with this sort of stuff. I'd say he's the equivalent of someone like a JYD or even a Hacksaw Jim Duggan, where always constantly over. It's never going to be that far up the card, but the fans really go for him.
Yeah, I mean, the more modern example would be a Santino, and Santino had a pretty good run where you could say he was getting, really big pops there for, maybe a 6-month stretch around '08, but that's really waned in the last couple years where he gets an okay pop now, but certainly nothing like what Jimmy was getting here, and obviously we've had a year and a half from the shows we've watched, so in a year and a half window, he's been able to maintain some huge heat.
So, are we saying that Jimmy Valiant is the king of the dancing baby faces of this era?
I think he's holding the crown right now, because I mean, just his entrance here. I don't know why. I mean, I just had a smile the whole time, and like I said, when he kissed Dr. Tom, and Tom sort of chuckles right before he makes the announcement. I thought that was just great.
I also think the visuals may be part of it. Like, he's got that big beard, and I think that.
Yeah. I mean, Jimmy definitely looks like somebody that. I mean, he might honestly be asking you for money on the way out of the arena. He kind of has that.
Yeah. Could also be a ZZ Top fan.
Yeah, or a construction worker. Just a very great look that kind of gets over.
No, you do not get guys like this in wrestling anymore. And even if you fast forwarded like 2 or 3 years from this point, so like in 88 to 89, hard to imagine Jimmy Valiant in that sort of setting as well.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like you said, Duggan was probably the closest WWF in the 80s got. I mean, Duggan was more of a standing tall babyface instead of, dancing shtick. But he sort of was that kind of simpleton type, good times role babyface. But Jimmy was really good.
I don't know if we want to get into this now, but one of the things that's always, because as I explained before, I was always a heel fan. Like, even when I was a kid, I supported heels. Like, my favorite guy, like, I agree with everything Jesse Ventura said. I supported heels. And that was, like, it always struck me that there's always this dynamic where the heels are actually clever guys. They're intelligent. They are, they have a plan. Usually the more scientific wrestlers are heels. And baby faces are often kind of like happy-go-lucky. They don't think a lot. They don't have any tactics. Like, and I guess Jimmy Valiant and Hacksaw Jim Duggan are both, two different versions of that. But I was wondering, like, is this something in the U.S. psyche where, in the American psyche where somebody who's vaguely intelligent has to be evil in some way, or like, what's the idea with a babyface being somebody who's hasn't got a lot going on upstairs?
Well, I don't know. I always hated Duggan as a kid just because I would think he would do some absolutely boneheaded decisions as far as he'd have the match won and then just go out and get a chair, or a lot of his count-out finishes is him just beating up somebody on the outside and he can't even realize that the referee's right above him shouting, counting to 10. And he can't roll back in or be bothered to roll back in. So that's why I always hated Duggan. I mean, Jimmy here, I don't think he's splitting the atom anytime soon with the way he's portrayed. But at least in this match, he did get outsmarted, by somebody like JJ Dillon, and it wasn't him doing something just completely boneheaded.
Yeah, but I'm just trying to understand, like, why is it that these characters are baby faces in the first place, and anybody, like, kind of who's slightly more like, I guess it's just this idea that somebody who's got a plan necessarily is going to be a baddie. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I think in any medium, whether it's wrestling or, comic books or movie villains, most of the time the person with the master plan is the devious villain.
Yeah. And going forward, we'll see that this, it's not just Jimmy Valiant and Hacksaw Jim Duggan who are a little bit short upstairs when we're looking at baby faces. I'm thinking in particular of Sting. And moving forward, we'll see.
Now Sting, he'll err on the side of Duggan, I'm sure, where he just makes some boneheaded decisions, way too trustworthy. We'll cross that bridge when we get there, but I'm not going to be defending Sting. I didn't have a problem with this because, again, I mean, JJ Dillon is essentially sort of treated as the Bobby Heenan of NWA. So, I mean, him coming out and costing Jimmy the match here, it at least didn't seem like it was something that Jimmy did where he made just a dumb mistake.
Interesting that Dillon would help out a fellow manager here.
Yeah, yes.
In WF, it's not always clear that the managers are together. And in fact, there are many instances where they're actually at odds, where they're bidding for the same guy, or, they get in each other's way, or they have a slight rivalry. Whereas here, clearly, Dillon is helping out Jones, just because they're both evil. I don't know, just because they're both managers. We should have mentioned as well that Paul Jones has a long-running feud with the Assassin here, which is why the Assassin is out. If you remember, Hercules Hernandez was Assassin number 2. I think Paul Jones kind of stole Assassin number 2 after I think they lost some sort of, Assassin 2 had to unmask after a certain match, and Paul Jones was involved in this. So that's where the Assassin's involvement is. Yeah, throughout this, Soley and Coddle now just call the member of the Zambuie Express there the Zambuie throughout. So they've given up even trying to figure out who this guy is. Shivani's with Ric Flair. And I've got a big note here saying that Flair is still in his Minnesota Flair mode here. He's definitely not Slick Rick yet. He's not wearing his shades. He's not wearing a suit. He's still just in a gym jumper. And he's still kind of... he's still in this kind of subdued... it's almost like Flair's got two different voices. The Ric Flair we know and love has got a much higher pitched voice than this. Do you know what I mean? Where he kind of speaks with a much higher.
Yeah, he wasn't full on a heel here either, and kind of the tone he takes here. Once again, since I've been watching the '94 yearbook, it's really fresh. But sort of the transition he makes from the Vader feud to the Steamboat feud to then the Hogan feud in 1994. This kind of reminded me of around the April-May area where he was feuding with Steamboat, where he wasn't, a full-blown heel, wasn't really a baby face, but just sort of his demeanor and his tone here reminded me a lot of that.
So are we saying this is tweener Flair, I guess?
Yeah, that's sort of the kind of...
Now, there's a very slight hint of Slick Rick here. He says he calls himself the #1 stud.
Dusty Rhodes, you lay over there as laid back as you want to, Daddy. I know you're watching me right now. You better be half the man as you've told these people you are, because you're jumping on the #1 stud in all of professional wrestling.
And this is the only hint of him really talking himself up at this point. But there's no to be the man, you've got to beat the man, etc.
Right, right.
And I'm actually wondering, had that character not really debuted at this point? Like earlier on in Flair's career, had he had kind of stretches where he was that guy? Or does that really emerge during 85?
I think 85 is when he was at his peak. I mean, I'm certain when he developed his Nature Boy persona, for instance, in in the Star Wars 82 cage match versus Kerry Von Erich. He's pretty slick Rick in that match. Just the way he carries himself and the way he acts throughout that match. It wasn't as, obvious as his sort of signature Horseman run, but he'd shown glimpses of it before this.
See, I'm wondering if winning, spoilers, but I'm wondering if winning the $1 Million Challenge at the end of this show, it was actually the catalyst, it was actually the reason that he became, jet flying and whatnot, because he suddenly had a pile of money. I wonder.
That's interesting. That's possible. I haven't seen the TV after this, but that'd be interesting if somebody knows that.
I have the Will's Horseman set, and that starts kind of like midway through 85, and he's already kind of like, with the first promo in that, he's already Slick Rick by that point. So clearly something happens between now and then. I don't know if it's a gradual thing or whether he just kind of turns up one day with a fully fledged gimmick, but it's interesting that this is December 84 and he's still quite a long way from being the Ric Flair that we know. I just assumed going into this show that he was going to be, Slick Rick. Yeah. Going in, so I was surprised. So anyway, we going into the next match, and now this was surprising. Dick Slater now is a babyface against Cowboy Ron Bass with JJ Dillon. And so obviously 1 year ago, Dick Slater was one of the biggest heels on the roster, massively allied with Harley Race. And on, he was a heel. But apparently Black Bart and Ron Bass jumped Dick Slater at one point. And this was actually part of the Steamboat and Tully angle as well. For whatever reason, Slater and Steamboat were hanging out somewhere, and Black Bart and Ron Bass jumped them both, injuring Steamboat, and I think Tully was part of this as well. So like Tully, Black Bart, and Ron Bass, all managed by JJ Dillon, attacked Dick Slater and Ricky Steamboat. Steamboat seemed to get the worst of it because he got injured, but this also turned Dick Slater face. So this is them. This is a match now for the Mid-Atlantic title, and automatically there's a kind of change in the way Dick Slater is presented. Like Soli calls him unpredictable. Caudle said he's out of control, and interestingly, he compares him to Roddy Piper, which really surprised me that he mentioned Roddy Piper, who would have been in WF at this point.
Yeah, that was kind of an odd call to him. An appropriate comparison with the way Slater was working this match, but yeah, that was bizarre that Caudle would mention Piper, considering he was deeply embedded in the competition by that point.
So this was interesting to me because not only has Slater changed his personality here, he's also changed his style. Because I mentioned before he was basically a scientific wrestler last year. Now he's kind of much more in the Roddy Piper kind of, face Terry Funk mode.
Yeah, there was a lot more scrappiness. He kept chasing after JJ in this match, and a lot of more sort of punching and grabbing and chasing after Bass, and definitely sort of, he did remind me a lot of Piper here, and he worked this match well as a babyface. Slater is not somebody that I could ever recall, being much of a babyface, but he got a great reaction, worked the match well. In the middle of this match, the referee did an idiotic thing where he catches the boot of Slater and allows Bass to take over, which I thought was just awful.
Caudle says that Ron Bass is more methodical and has more power. I was having trouble kind of pinning Ron Bass's style. Like, I don't know, what sort of wrestler is he? I've seen quite a, from what I've seen of Ron Bass, he's never struck me as he's kind of nondescript. Like and he didn't really do much in this match. He did one suplex and a bulldog during this match. But yeah, it's hard to pin a real style on him on Ron Bass.
Yeah, I kind of see him in a lot of the Black Bart mold. Pretty punch and kick style, kind of unassuming, not very interesting. I didn't think this match was very good, and a lot had to do with Bass's end of not being able to really put a lot of heat on Slater. And then the finish is one that I always absolutely hate, where, Slater has the pin on Bass, but the referee DQs him because he sort of shoved down the referee and let his temper get the best of him. And that, sort of like what we was talking about before, to me that's more of an instance of a really boneheaded, dumb babyface move that doesn't make Slater look very intelligent at all.
We actually saw that on the All Japan set. I think Steamboat hits the ref at one point.
Yeah, which is it's just, why would you do that? But
not a great finish, a DQ. The only note I've got here is that JJ Dillon is absolutely great in this match.
Yeah, he was really effective interfering. Again, like we saw in previous matches, Gary Hart would constantly jump on the apron and not be able to do anything effectively. Here, JJ picked his spots and worked his moves and spots in effectively and really got heat on himself. He got a lot more heat than Bass did.
Yeah, and he did a lot of great kind of like just subtle little things, sneaky little looks. Good stuff from JJ Dillon, and maybe he's someone who's kind of stock rising for me as this.
Right, me too.
So the next match here, face Ollie Anderson, very surprising, and Keith Larson versus the Russians. Now, Keith Larson apparently was a guy with Don Canodle's brother, and he was a guy who had been around quite a lot, different territories. Solely calls them the Scandinavian Connection, but the angle here is heavily pro-US. So this is kind of a patriotic deal versus the Russians here.
Yeah, we got the national anthem, which halfway through the show was kind of odd placement. And then we get Neil Diamond's America. Starts blaring over the screen. The lasers come back. The lasers make a big map of the United States of America. And with America and USA gets written inside of it with the lasers. So this was about as 80s as you can get watching this.
Yeah, and it interesting to see Ole Anderson positioned as a kind of patriotic American here.
Yeah, he almost looked as out of place as Assassin with Tyler dancing around to Footloose. Ole looked about as uncomfortable with Neil yelling, "We're coming to America," as he stands there in the corner.
So the weird thing here is that despite this heavy kind of, USA angle, Solly keeps on calling them the Scandinavian Connection.
Larson and Anderson, the Scandinavian Connection here. Very partisan crowd here, as well it should be, cheering on the American team, the Scandinavian Connection of Ole Anderson and Keith Larson.
I don't understand. It's just a really weird thing to do, to highlight the fact that these guys have a Scandinavian background.
Yeah, that was weird.
So yeah, Keith Larson is someone I looked up a little bit, and he actually, I think, hold on a second, I'll pull up his stuff here. He was also known as Rocky Canodle, and he was Don Canodle's brother. And I think the angle here is that the Russians had injured Don Canodle.
Yeah, they took him out, and so Keith had to step up. But it seems like he had sort of a pretty short career, so I don't know what happened to him after this, but kind of in and out based on the information I'd seen. I wasn't familiar with him at all.
He seemed pretty over here to me.
Yeah, I thought this match was really well worked for what it was, and Anderson was a surprising good babyface. Larson kind of, is somebody that I was expecting, honestly, the worst of. While I thought he was probably the worst person in this match, he sort of stayed out of the way. They sort of knew his limitations and worked around those, so everything he did was fine. And then I thought the Koloffs, especially Nikita, just looked like a beast. He looked really good in this match.
Is this our first look at the Russians? I think we.
Yeah, they were not on the two previous shows, so, and I thought they looked good here. I know Ivan later on, one of the kind of things that was always striking to me when you first started learning the history of wrestling was here was somebody that ended Bruno's reign, and the first thing I remembered about Ivan Koloff was that he always was in mid-card feuds and NWA getting the crap kicked out of him, but here he looked real effective. In the start of this match, they work over Ivan's arm for a while, so we get a really long base segment.
Every Russians match I've ever seen has the same structure. So it starts with Ivan Koloff taking a beating.
Yeah,
basically.
Just taking a beating.
And I mean, I wonder about this structure because obviously it's heel-in-peril, but it does have I guess it has the effect of building up Nikita Koloff as a real dominating force.
Yeah, I think in some ways they were sort of booked in a corner with that pairing. Here, I mean, this segment went a little long. It wasn't as long. I didn't have as many problems with it as like the Kernerdle segment in the Final Conflict cage match.
Yeah.
But it did go a little long here before Nikita came in.
But there is a big difference because that Kernerdle segment didn't really build Slaughter, if that makes any sense. Like, it wasn't, because Slaughter came in and just got his ass handed to him immediately.
Yeah. Here you did build, and when Nikita came in, the tide definitely switched pretty immediately.
But it also kind of like, because every Russians match I've ever seen, and I've seen, probably like 12 of them or something so far, it has got this structure, and I guess it does make Nikita seem like an absolute beast when he gets in, but it also does make Ivan Koloff seem quite like the weak link in this side as well, in this team. But I mean, I guess the real reason is because they're protecting Nikita. I mean, he's essentially like a Bill Goldberg or someone like that at this point.
Yeah, they were really protecting Nikita, and Ivan I didn't think looked as incompetent as he did at numerous other times here, even though he did get worked on for a while. The ending where Nikita gave Kernerdle the clothesline outside, I thought that was great. I mean, that looked brutal. He really gave him a stiff clothesline on the outside, and then Ivan got the chain and hit Larson with it to get the win, and the crowd was pissed. I mean, you had trash flying in. People were upset about that, and they did I thought, a good job kind of, preventing even more trash or whatever to come in the ring, because Kernerdle then gets in the ring with his crutches and starts firing off on the Russians with his crutches. So you kind of end with the baby faces triumphant. They lost the match.
They get to retain a little bit of their heat, I guess.
I thought this was, again, very formulaic, structure-wise, but well done.
This was effective for what it was. I mean, I guess the faces. We get one pump handle slam from Ollie Anderson, but other than that, the face, the heel-in-peril segment, the offense isn't anything particularly interesting.
Right.
And then we do get a very long bear hug from Nikita when he gets in. It's
Yes.
like he comes in, he dominates, but then all he's really got to do is a bear hug. It's like he doesn't have really, a lot of stuff to do when he's dominating.
Yeah, he's to me, he's definitely better sort of running around bulldozing people, like when he gave Knurl the clothesline. I mean, he looked so powerful and explosive given that move.
Yeah, and the finish was good because it showed Ivan Koloff being a sneaky kind of older veteran heel with a chain. But I was a little bit confused because the announcers don't call it. They seem to ignore the finish. It just kind of happened.
I don't know if they didn't see him get the chain or what, but this was sort of our last example of them not completely being on board with the finish.
Yeah, and I mean, if I was a producer watching the show after last year, I'd be thinking, for next year, do we get Soley on again? Or do we think about getting another announcer? Because they definitely don't have any chemistry, these two. And by this point, it's really obvious. Yeah, decent. And I wonder what happened to Don Knodel after this. I mean, does he? Do we see him again?
I don't think so. I don't recall seeing. He may be. Is he in Starrcade in '85? It's possible.
Yeah, because he seemed reasonably over here to me, Don Knodel. As over as I guess as over as he'd ever be, and a babyface by this point, obviously.
Apparently in Starrcade '85, he seconds the Rock and Roll Express versus the Russians again. So
right, yeah. So this was.
I don't quite know what the deal is with that.
This, I guess, was his big feud for some time here. Like, this was his deal, being injured and being against the Russians. But of course, his career peaked with that cage match, as we know, as we mentioned. He won't have another match as good as that cage match.
Oh yeah. And I just looked, and then Starrcade '86, him and Larson as Rocky Knurl faced Tim Horner and Nelson Royal in the opener. So
I cannot wait for that.
yeah, I may have to jump ahead and watch that as soon as we're done here.
Okay, so now we have a match that genuinely surprised me in existing at all. Tully Blanchard versus Ricky Steamboat. Given the reps of these two guys, you'd think that this match would be highlighted a little bit more. But honestly, this is the first I'd really seen or heard of it.
I mean, I think this match has a okay reputation. I think most of the time, though, it's one of those, this is sort of the rose among the thorns as far as this card's concerned, where this was the lone bright spot and just a pretty subpar overall show. But, whereas I think that's really, for example, I think the Bulldogs Dream Team match from WrestleMania 2 has really been romanticized because of that exact thing, where it's the one good match among a bunch of terrible matches. This one sort of gets downplayed overall.
Do you think that this has a rep as a hidden gem? Do you think that would be fair? Like, amongst those in the know, it's got a rep as a kind of hidden gem.
Yeah, I mean, I will expect this to be on the 80s DVD VR set. I would assume most people that participate in that had seen it before when they watched that, and I would expect it to rank pretty highly.
But so this, I also think, so I did have a look. I think this is the only time these two ever faced each other on TV or anything.
Yeah, I can't recall them ever mixing up again.
Yeah, I don't think they'd ever.
This is certainly their most marquee matchup at the very least.
So the obviously Steamboat has injured ribs going into this from the attack by Black Bart, Ron Bass, and Blanchard, and that's really the storyline going into this. Steamboat's got injured ribs. Blanchard, his game plan is to take out those ribs, and we have an immediate fire to start here. it's just a hot start, and then an awesome suplex and a backbreaker kind of on the ribs. I really like that. Blanchard gives Steamboat a kind of rib breaker, I guess you'd call it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
His rib work was really good.
Yeah, there's just basically just great psychology here, and we see like some real great healing from Tully. He's cocky. He starts even prancing about a little bit, like when he's on top. This is some of the best wrestling we've seen so far on these NWA shows between these two, as you'd expect, I think.
Yeah, I think Tully brought out a lot of sort of fire in Steamboat, which I think works best with him when he's sort of able. I know Steamboat at sometimes can do sort of these goofy, mocking poses where he sort of intimidates. One that always comes to mind is I love his matches versus Rick Rude, but when he'd always do the Rude, pose where he wiggles his hips, I always thought that looked sort of goofy and campy.
Yeah.
Here, he does the slingshot suplex to sort of one-up Blanchard, and I thought that was a really fun moment.
Yeah.
Of Steamboat sort of kind of getting one over on Tully.
I've got written here, I mean, Tully gives Steamboat a back suplex, and then I've got written, Steamboat's chops and strikes are sensational, Tully's bloodied, and we go from those chops and strikes into we transition into a section where Steamboat's on top. He gives Blanchard a neck breaker, a slingshot suplex, an amazing drop kick, and then hits a splash from the top. That is some of the best sequence of offensive moves from anyone that we've seen so far. And that slingshot suplex was surprising that he had the cheek of hitting Tully's finisher on him just in the middle of that. I was really impressed.
This match really told a great story. 12 minutes, so not very long, but had a good heated beginning. Tully takes advantage, works over the ribs in great fashion, and then, like you just described, a really, really hot ending sequence.
Yeah, so then there's a little bit of skullduggery there, because Tully's got the brass knucks from JJ, and we get a little bit of a screwy finish. And I've got written, this is a good to great match, but it's probably too short to be anything more than that.
Yeah, I guess if we want to throw out star ratings, I wouldn't have a problem going 4 stars with this, though, I think.
Yeah, easy.
I thought it was pretty great. Told a good story in the time. Again, Steamboat, we saw some things from him that weren't very customary from him at this time or throughout his career. A little more fire, a little more intensity. And then Tully was he's just a great big heel. That strut that he did that you were talking about, that was just a great sort of strut around, pompous move.
And yeah, this is the first time I think we've seen two really great, I guess you could say Flair and Race as well, but where you get two really good workers in the ring together, and it just almost immediately as this match starts, I just thought, yes, this is going to be good.
Maybe Steamboat and Slaughter in the cage match, but I would say Tully was a better opponent for Steamboat.
Yeah.
Than Slaughter. Slaughter was great at bumping in that match, but as far as an overall story and what Tully brought, I thought he was better overall for Steamboat.
I did actually think that had this gone 20 minutes rather than 12, it could have been a 5-star probably. It would be.
Yeah, this with a little more time, a little more work on the ribs if they'd have been allowed it. And I didn't have a problem with the finish. It's sort of part of the course. Is it screwy? Yes, but it kind of fit with the theme of the match and still got over that Tully was a coward. So Steamboat was right all along, but Tully ended up the victor.
Yeah. So last time out, you mentioned that you think that you suspect that Steamboat might be a little bit overrated. That you don't even think he's in the conversation, as it were. And I think that after this showing here, he's basically off to WF now. So we're not going to see him for a few years from this point. Like he's not going to be back until '89, I don't think.
Right. Yeah. I think his next show will be the Chi-Town Rumble, actually.
So, literally the next time we see him is going to be the trilogy, pretty much. So, at this juncture, so we've just seen him in the cage match with Slaughter, and now we have this match. Has your opinion changed of him at all, or do you still think that he's not really?
I mean, I'd seen this match before, and I knew I really, really liked it. I mean, I would put this probably in Steamboat's top 10 matches that he's had. It's probably in my top 10 for him. I think it's a great match. I mean, I don't think he's had a bad performance per se, but he did do some stuff in the cage match that I found slightly annoying. And I didn't think the Starrcade 83 tag match, while good, was anything special. And what I've always said about Steamboat, I mean, last time out, is just from my frame of reference in, 2000, 2001, getting on the internet, if I, at that time, cold, would have gotten on the internet and typed in, a search, who's the greatest wrestler of all time, with my knowledge then, I would have expected, Steamboat, Flair, these types of names to come up.
Yeah.
And even now, I think there's still some of that resonating, but is lessening. But just with everything I've seen, I don't think he's a real contender. Great worker, absolutely, but I think he's had some performances that were, terrible as far as what we saw in the All Japan set. I thought, that match with Jimmy Snuka was absolutely awful. And there's just a lot of things that there's a couple of little things that he does that sort of annoys me and aggravates me. But in this match, he was excellent. Had no problem with him in this match.
I guess Steamboat's reputation comes from two places, I think. I mean, I think his high-end matches are very well publicized. Savage and Flair, basically.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that if you listen to shoot interviews or listen to old-time, any wrestlers of this era, when they talk about who they think is the best wrestler, they always bring up Steamboat as a guy who always gave 100%, had absolutely the right attitude. Like his backstage rep couldn't be any higher, basically. And I think it comes from those two places. So like anyone kind of in the business kind of thinks it for themselves, that Steamboat is kind of like the benchmark for work rate or effort or attitude, etc. So yeah, it comes from that as much as anything else. So where were we here? Oh yes,
We're up to the classic encounter.
US title, Billy Graham versus Wahoo McDaniel, and we get kung fu fighting over the tannoy. And this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. So kung fu fighting plays. Billy Graham is in like kung fu, like he's working some weird kung fu gimmick here, and he throws some of the fakest looking kung fu moves you'll ever see. I mean,
and he looked awful in his face. I mean, he looked like he'd gotten a day pass out of the nursing home and wound up at the arena.
I read up a little bit about this kung fu gimmick, and apparently this was Billy Graham's idea, and he kept on pushing with it. Like, it wasn't getting over. He looked he looked ridiculous. Clearly he was making kind of like a joke of himself, yet he still persisted with it. Clearly Graham not a good booking mind. to stick with that gimmick. And this was sad to see, really.
Yeah, this was really sad.
Wahoo McDaniel looks very grizzled, and I've got written here he's got like a real red whiskey nose, like those kind of like when the nose is kind of turned a little bit, and he's got a very charismatic looking face. So yeah, he's looking very grizzled here in '84. I don't know what he's going to be looking like in these '87, '88 matches on the AWA style.
Right.
This was crap.
Yeah. This was really bad. Very short for a semi-main, just atrocious.
It's a squash match. I mean, there's nothing else to it.
I mean, and the finish at 4 minutes is so abrupt because Graham gets a full Nelson on Wahoo. Wahoo overtakes that, gives him a double tomahawk chop, which in the Wahoo chop department, this one was very lightly thrown, and then pins him. And like I said, in just over 4 minutes, and this was just a train wreck.
Was this face versus face, or was Wahoo actually a heel?
Well, yeah, I mean, they were talking about on the announcers, which I didn't recall and was sort of surprised about. Wahoo, I guess, was sort of turning heel at this time because I know Gordon kept alluding that not everybody agreed with his actions, so I don't quite know what the backstory was there, but I was surprised by that.
This is an obvious low point in Billy Graham's career.
Yeah, this was really sad.
It's weird to see someone who had kind of like quite a big reputation and someone who was obviously pretty high on, a main eventer, jobbed out in this fashion.
Yeah, and in some ways they should have known better. I mean, I don't know why they decided. I know Billy Graham was a big name, but there's no way this should have been the semi-main event or the next to last match on this card.
I'm guessing it was.
And they should have just known better.
I'm thinking that it was as short as it was because Graham couldn't work at this point.
Yeah, I mean, this was like the Divas match before the main event in modern WWE times. I mean, 4 minutes, Graham was moving very slowly. Like I said, his face looked really old, and this was terrible.
What was the deal with Graham? Did he have some sort of like problem?
Well, I think it was essentially his health just failed on him very rapidly. I mean, as we see, this is the end of '84, so 3 years later when he was helping out Don Morocco, he already had the cane and the pretty substantial limp. So
yeah,
he just really declined rapidly.
Of all the gimmicks he could have picked, I don't understand the Kung Fu thing, because he seems to know absolutely nothing about Kung Fu.
Stupid gimmick.
I could do a better impression of Kung Fu than that. Anyway, we're going into the main event now, and I think it's face versus face. I don't think Flair is a heel here at all, listening by the crowd reaction.
I thought Flair got the bigger pop.
He definitely got a decent pop here.
Yeah.
It's not obvious this is face versus face. And we have a special guest ref, Smoking Joe Frazier.
Yeah.
Pretty awful promo before that as well, involving Joe Frazier and...
Well, yeah, you had the judges. That was a sight to behold in its own.
Now, who were those guys? Do you know?
I still don't know who the Japanese superstar was. They announced his name twice, but I couldn't make it out. I was hoping you could write that down or you would catch it because, I didn't know who it was. But at least supposedly he was a wrestling superstar. So, I'm fine with him being a judge. But then you have Joe Frazier, who's obviously a famous boxer. So while he's qualified to be a wrestler, judge, I don't know, especially considering he's refereeing the match, but boxing, wrestling, I can sort of believe they're close enough that I'll give it a pass. But then you have Kyle Petty, who is the son of Richard Petty, him and Dale Earnhardt are the two most famous NASCAR stock car racer drivers of all time.
Right.
In the States. So Kyle Petty is Richard Petty's son, and how he would have any qualification to judge a wrestling match, I have no idea. I don't know why they brought him in as a celebrity. I guess he did get a nice ovation from the crowd, which, if you follow Kyle Petty's career, he was pretty disappointing. He obviously wasn't able to fill his father's shoes in stock car racing, but I just thought that was so weird that he was deemed, qualified to judge on this match.
I'm actually thinking that in terms of demographics and whatnot, there'd probably be quite a big crossover between stock car racing fans and wrestling fans. Probably the same kind of it's the same blue-collar worker type fans who would be attracted to.
Yeah, I would say there's crossover, but I don't think anybody would say I've got to watch this show because Kyle Petty's judging the main event, and basically all we get of him is this promo, which was terrible, and then he comes out and waves to the crowd.
I can't find anything on this Japanese star. I've got a feeling it was just Mr. Ito again, because it doesn't seem to be that anybody who's ever done a review of the show can find the name of this Japanese star. So, or maybe they got would Hiro Matsuda have been around at this point?
I don't know. I couldn't catch it. I wanted to know who this was, but. Never could make out.
I suspect.
And then they had a production mistake when Gordon thought they were throwing to something and they didn't have it lined up or whatever. And I love Gordon sort of laughing it off.
Yeah, pretty awkward scenes.
Yeah. This was a train wreck before it started.
I don't know if we see Soli again, but. For me, he's a very awkward screen presence in general. For someone who was on TV for so long, it seems weird that he seems so uncomfortable whenever he was on camera.
Yeah. You hear stories about him being inebriated. So I don't know about that, but maybe a possibility. Okay, I do have some information on the famous Duke Kiyomuka.
Who is this
was
guy?
Our judge. According to Online World of Wrestling, made his debut in 1947. Finishing move, as predicted, the karate chop. And it looks like he was very, very 50s, 60s was his prime. A lot of Texas. He won a lot of championships in Texas, facing Fritz and whatnot. But his last title win was in 1966. So we're talking about almost 20 years removed from that time when he judged this. So probably not a lot of nostalgia carrying over.
He was a big star he was a Japanese star who got over in the US, basically.
Yeah, it looks like he was sort of the big kind of foreign star, I would assume heel, in the Texas territory during the 50s and 60s, probably coming off World War II. Right.
So yeah, weird that they choose these three judges in particular. I mean, what do you think the creative meeting was there? We're gonna get in this guy Petty. We're gonna get in Smoking Joe Fraser to ref, and I know we'll get in this Japanese dude who held some Texas titles in the 60s. It's like, of all the wrestlers, they could have asked. What was Sandy Scott doing?
And I don't know. I would assume that Muhammad Ali was not announced for WrestleMania 1 by this time. But having Smoking Joe, I mean, he's a great boxer.
Yeah, big star.
I mean, he was one of the legendary boxers, but that is such a trump card by Vince to get Muhammad Ali when they just got Smoking Joe.
Absolutely, it's just going one better, isn't it? Or even several levels better.
Yeah. I mean, it's just total one-upsmanship because everybody would consider Smoking Joe great, but Muhammad Ali is legendary, transcendent, whatever adjective you want to throw his way.
And I was very interested in the weights at the introduction of the match. Dusty Rhodes, much the heavier of the two wrestlers.
Well, Dusty is carrying a little weight on this match, and I was talking to him. He said he's picked up some strength from it. He has been working out with the heavy weights of late.
Soly's like, this really amused me. He said, Dusty's carrying a little extra weight in this match, but he says it's given him some extra strength. He's been working on the weights too.
Yeah. I don't think so.
And then he says, of course, Dusty was he had offers to go into pro baseball, into pro football, but he didn't like the team nature of those sports, and he preferred the individualism of wrestling, the last of the rugged individualist sports, which was both poetic and really funny to me.
Dusty's an all-around athlete. He was a shortstop in baseball, played offensive line in football, had offers in both pro baseball, pro football, and in pro wrestling, and tried pro football. Said he just didn't like the team-type discipline. He's a man of individual discipline, and it has brought him, of course, in this sport, which is the last of the rugged individual sports in the world, in my opinion.
Is that true? Like, was Dusty a kind of athlete?
Yeah, Dusty was actually a very good baseball player.
Did he go to West Texas University like every other wrestler in the world?
I don't think he did go to West Texas.
Because there was that big class, wasn't there? With
yeah, you had Funk and Tully. I mean, I think Tully pretty much was sort of the star of all them. I mean, he was the quarterback.
Yeah, DiBiase, I think, was in that class. Tito Santana, something tells me, was in that.
Yes. Tito went there.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of them, but I mean, Dusty is from Texas, so. But then again, going to college doesn't really fit in with his blue collar kind of image. So maybe he didn't. I don't know.
All right.
He had offers, says Soly. So, yeah. So Dusty actually goes for the figure four really early here, and Flair injures his leg very quickly in this match. And I've just got written, this is typical Flair versus Dusty stuff. There's not a lot else to say.
Yeah, I mean, this was a very condensed version of their match. I don't know if the show was running long or this is what they plan to do all the time, but yeah, I mean, he did slap on this figure four about 4 minutes into the match.
Yeah. So
you get no sense of the story they're trying to tell. I mean, this was almost worked as a sprint, but it just seemed abrupt to me. It didn't work at all the way they sort of worked this match.
And then we get. I mean, for me, this is putting Joe. Obviously, it's not his fault. It was probably booked this way. But for me, this is putting Joe Frazier over the top of worst ref ever. To me, the finish here, Dusty gets some color, and he starts bleeding, just like every other time we've ever seen Dusty Rhodes wrestle. Just like earlier on, where we saw Manny Fernandez with blood on him. Just like any other match where we see blood. And the match is stopped. I don't like, and then Soly says, "Well, I can't fault Frazier."
Yeah,
here.
I guess you could, in some ways, justify that in boxing, they're not as privy to blood as much as in wrestling. And when Dusty cut himself, I thought it actually was more bloody than I remembered. I know the Great American Bash Flair Luger finish. When we go back and revisit that, I mean, I remember that being just essentially a trickle where I've probably bled more from paper clip, paper cuts than what Luger had bleeding. This I didn't think was very much blood at all either, but Dusty I thought did a pretty good job of at least getting it angled to where it was kind of running into his eye. But, I mean, this is just such a cheap cop-out finish.
This is a terrible finish.
On the biggest show of the year, it's pretty much unforgivable to have a finish like this.
Of all the finishes, this is among the worst finishes of, it's a terrible finish.
Yeah, I mean, I know the Dusty finish is kind of obviously it's a famous finish in the next year. But this one was really, really bad. And Smokin' Joe didn't exactly do a fabulous job up to that point. He was in the way a good bit.
But solely saying can't fault him, I don't...
Yeah, that sort of gets into the same thing as solely talking about how awesome a job Knitsky was doing in the cage match, where... like I said in that show, I really like a kind of announcer to sort of be saying what the viewer at home's thinking, and solely just sort of sticks to the straight line script and the story they're trying to tell and refuses to veer from it. So you never get any, this is bowl and shoe ugly kind of, cryptic comments from him.
Yeah. Not one good finish on this entire card.
Nothing I would say is exceptional. Again, I don't have a problem with the Steamboat Tully finish or the tag match finish, because those weren't main event positions, and I mean it's the '80s, so you're gonna have a good many crap finishes. The main event really puts this show over. I mean, it certainly wasn't good. Up until the main event, there were some decent matches, but the main event really makes this one into just a very forgettable show. Pretty tough to get through. It's a 3-hour show, and it was tough for me to get through it.
3 sittings for me, 3 separate sittings.
Yeah, it took me multiple sittings, whereas Starrcade '83, I did it in pretty much one sitting. Final Conflict was an hour and a half, so I did that in one sitting also.
Very, very underwhelming show.
Yeah.
And
Starrcade '83 was not, the show of all time, but it had, I thought a great match in Piper Valentine, a good match in the Youngblood Steamboat versus Briscoes, and then at the very least, a great finish with Flair winning the belt in the cage. This had, one good to great match, a couple of decent matches, but then just a terrible taste is left in your mouth from the main event, and a bunch of other meaningless stuff. This felt like a show building to another show, not the biggest show of the year.
So is this Dusty booking still?
I don't know who was booking in 1984. If Dusty was booking this, he really made himself seem terrible in this match.
Really, really strange. And I'm just like I said before that Pat Patterson has a rep as a great finish guy. If this is Dusty, he is the worst finish guy of all time, because like I said, not a single match has a good finish at the end of it. Some of the finishes are passable, but there's not one kind of is there a clean finish in this entire card?
Well, Adidas on Mr. Ito.
Yeah.
Well, if certainly not a memorable finish, but yeah, the Denny Brown, Mike Davis. That was sort of clean, but confusing. The Ito Adidas match was clean, but not much there. And then everything else was kind of screwy in one way or the other.
So we do get a couple of promos at the end. Flair's promo is not at all heelish. He just said, "I'll take that decision. Fine, I'll get to keep the belt." But he's not a dick about it at all.
Yeah, it was pretty gentlemanly.
And then Dusty Rhodes calls out Joe Frazier, and he wants him, which is really that can't turn into anything. So I don't understand that. I don't understand this at all.
Maybe Joe was looking for payday. I don't know. Yeah, this was. I mean, the way he was talking, it was revving up for a match, but it obviously didn't lead to one. So I don't know what the objective was.
Yeah, very, very strange booking all round. And I don't know. Flair doesn't really make a big deal about winning $1 million either.
Right, which, I mean, and one thing I want to say is, I do think the $1 million sort of diluted the importance of the championship. I mean, I know $1 million is a lot of money, but, I mean, they were sort of mentioning that first in this match. They were like, this match is for $1 million, and also for the NWA champion. You know, I mean, it's kind of an afterthought for the title.
All in all, I think this is one of the worst book shows I've seen in a while.
Yeah, this was bad, really bad. It's kind of interesting to see the WWF sort of follow through too with WrestleMania 2, where WrestleMania is not a great show but serviceable and has some good finishes and whatnot. And WrestleMania 2 is a pretty bad show, but at least in that match, in that show, it does have a good feel-good finish with Hogan beating Bundy. This had a terrible finish that, again, really left a sour taste in your mouth.
Yeah. Yeah, and the commentators basically, throughout the show, agree that this is, however good Starrcade 83 was, this was a night that surpasses it.
Yeah, that seemed really empty, especially at the end when you just watch this terrible finish. And then that's the first thing when they go back to Cottle and Gordon is them hemming and hawing how they so much surpass Starrcade 83, which is just...
But I think...
I mean, again, as a first-time viewer, I'd be thinking to myself, well, if that's, the pinnacle show that you can put out, maybe this is not for me.
But I think their message is belied by the looks on their faces.
They definitely didn't look like they were trying to sell it too big, but, I mean, to me, that's just something where you just scrap that and just go with, Dusty's wanting to seek revenge on Frazier. Just find something else to say instead of that, which is obviously a bunch of BS.
Yeah, so it's interesting that, you see the same pattern, and it happens quite a lot, where you get a reasonably hot thing first time around. The second time around, you lose some momentum there, and it's just not as good. And then the third year, or the third show, or the third thing, somehow manages to surpass the others. And definitely that's the case with WrestleMania. WrestleMania 1 was decent, good start. WrestleMania 2 was awful. WrestleMania 3 was a, classic night.
Right.
And I think we see the same pattern with Starrcade here, just preempting, 85 is generally considered a good night, I think. And you actually see that pattern in all sorts of strange places, like Super Mario Brothers. Super Mario Brothers 1, good game. Mario Brothers 2, not so much. Mario Brothers 3, smash hit. It's strange how that pattern works, but definitely it's the case here. And I wonder if the loss of momentum with this show, with Starrcade 84, may have given Vince a bit of, because he must have been planning WrestleMania at this point.
Yeah, I think he was sort of, when he viewed this, he was kind of licking his chops, because this was a pretty subpar effort all around.
And the business with, what do they call it, Black Saturday, that had happened by this point.
Yes.
So Crockett had bought the Georgia TV back from Vince. So they had that. They had their kind of TV in place. But as I understand it, the $1 million that Vince got for that purchase basically funded WrestleMania. So there we go. The rest is history. Shall we do our end of show awards here?
Yes, go ahead.
So what we got? MVP. Got to be Tully, hasn't it?
Yeah, I would say Tully or, again, Steamboat. I mean, I got no problems calling Steamboat great in that match. I thought his promo before it was pretty good. Tully or Steamboat, both of them were great.
Honorable mention for JJ Dillon as well.
Yeah, JJ really showed me a lot here. And then also I'd like to mention Boogie Woogie Man, because again, I mean, he was very over. Did what he was asked to do in an effective manner. So
I'd like to mention one of the Zambuis. I thought that's a joke. Match of the night is obvious as well. It's obviously Tully versus Steamboat.
I may have to go with Adidas, Mr. Ito.
And then do we do worst match? No, we just do worst non-MVP or worst.
Yeah, the least valuable player. Man. Oh, I mean, whoever booked the show probably has to be in the running. Smoking Joe did not look good.
I think there's only one contender for me, and it's obviously Billy Graham.
Oh yeah, Billy. That's the perfect part. Yeah, that was just. I mean, that was sad. I mean, that sort of shows I've tried to blot that from my memory. Just that was a sad match.
He goes back to WF then, right? Billy Graham.
Yeah, I mean, he would still sort of hang around, and I mean, it was just he was done by this point. So.
For me, I mean, having watched a lot of the Horseman stuff from '85, and I'm getting towards where I'm pretty familiar with the material from like '85 onwards. It's hard to see how the product goes from this to what we see there in a short space of time. I don't know what happens, but like the roster clearly changes quite a lot, and the quality of the matches goes up clearly. But I'm guessing. See, I wonder if it's a case of the way things are remembered as well, though, because I'm pretty sure even on Starrcade '85, for example, there'll be quite a lot of these kind of, I guess, glorified squash matches, or your average superstars match still on a supercard. I still think that carries on. But maybe we see less of it as time goes on.
Yeah, I've looked over the card and it doesn't look as egregious as what we got here. But I mean, yeah, Starrcade '85 is 12 matches, including a singles match with Billy Graham versus the Barbarian. So
I can't wait for that.
I can only imagine.
Oh, amazing! All right, well, we have that to look forward to. Thanks a lot. It's now 8 a.m. here, and I'm thinking of starting my day. I don't think I'm going to go back to bed now.
Yep, I'm heading back to bed as we speak.
All right. Well, thanks a lot, Chad. Starrcade '84 was difficult to sit through, and if anybody's still with us after 2 hours here, I guess this show may have been too. All right, bye.
See ya.
Fans, for all of us here at WCW Center Stage, for Cowboy Bill Watts and the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, I'm Jim Ross saying good night, everybody.